Good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you're signed in from. Welcome to today's webinar, brought to you by Scorebuddy, welcoming everybody to Building a QA Framework for Improved Customer Experience, How Agent Performance and Quality Management Impacts Customer Experience. We're pleased to present today's webinar, and Scorebuddy is a quality assurance solution for scoring customer service calls, emails, and web chat, and is dedicated to it's a dedicated standalone scoring resident system that's in the cloud and requires no integration. I will make some introductions first and introduce our speakers for today. Today's speakers are Derek Corcoran, who's a co-founder and CEO of Scorebuddy, and he'll be speaking today. And of course, we appreciate having here as a co-presenter Nate Brown, who's the Director of Customer Experience at UL EHSS, as well as the co-founder of CX Accelerator and one of ICMI's top 50 thought leaders. My name is Ellen Steinlauf, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. Without further ado, Nate, take it away.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Ellen. Hello, everybody, and welcome to one of my favorite topics. I love talking about customer experience, and especially in this area where it overlaps with my background, which is in the customer service area. And in these past 3 years, have had an opportunity to do more and more with QA. I've learned a lot about this element and how critical it is to that overall customer experience. So if you bump up that slide 1 for me. So just a little bit about my story and my background in this area and how this has ultimately evolved. And we started this about 3 years ago. We realized, hey, we're not doing quality, and it was just all about surviving the quantity of calls. And we finally got out of that victim mentality of can we survive the day, and realized, man, now let's focus on quality of calls. And we did our first iteration of a quality program. And we definitely learned a lot in that process, and it helped a little bit. And we did actually increase our internal quality score. But one of the big wake-up moments for me was somebody asked the question of, great, so your internal quality score went from X to X. So what does that mean for the customer? And it was like, whoa, like we had no correlation to the actual customer experience with the quality gains that we had made, and realizing in that moment we had not done enough to really make the quality program meaningful. And we needed to evolve the program and also to tie it back to what matters, which is enhancing the customer experience. So starting at number 1 there in that survival mode, moving beyond that victim mentality, and then needed to establish at least a rough framework, rough design. And we did that, and it gave us something to ultimately stand up as a straw man. And then within the past year and a half, in number 3 there, really evolving to a level 2 program where the agents had a lot more control and were a huge part of the evolution of the program. I mean, realizing, if we're all honest with what creates that quality call, it's edifying and building up the confidence of these agents. If they can approach that call feeling like they have the ability to do a slam dunk on that call and to really help that customer, it's going to be a great experience. And our quality program should be designed so that it gives the agents that level of confidence instead of feeling as though it's a big brother thing or something that's just trying to knock them down. We should be building them up. And so in order to create that type of environment and that culture within the program, we had the agents build it. They really were involved with that next level program, and we were thrilled with how they ultimately designed it. And then as we continue to evolve into this next stage, it's really focused on how can we tie this back to the larger customer experience initiative, and then also how can we really focus on training outcomes, the meaningful behaviors that we want to focus on with the agents. So that's a little bit about my QA story. And I've got a few specific things that I would love to share as part of that journey that I think will help all of you. So let's talk about the meaningful training outcomes and really tying it back to that. And if you look on the left of this slide, so I have behaviors versus scores. And one of the things that we did with the initial program is that we made it way too score oriented in terms of the focus for the agents. Now, scores are very important, and how are you supposed to be able to see the gains that you're making and the improvements that you've been able to do unless you have that baseline of data and those scores? But for the agent, what we're really concerned about there is that they know and understand how they can do a better job with the customer interaction. And so we've reduced the focus of scores for the agent and have done way more focus on the actual behaviors as part of the coaching there and within their goals, even writing the goals instead of trying to go from a 3.5 to a 4 in a particular area. It's making this happen. It's doing this on the phone. And the agents can really self-identify with, have they been successful in that area or not? And then number two, so really being able to garner multiple perspectives. You have this element that can happen within a quality program where it's kind of us versus them. It's easy to strike that dynamic when you have a quote-unquote quality team and then you have everybody else and they're grading those other people. But what really can help to break down that dynamic and create this healthy building up of the agent is when they have multiple perspectives that are involved, where you have, as an example, let's look at marketing. So a lot of times the marketing function within the organization, they're creating the brand voice. They're saying, hey, this is the look and feel of our organization. And we all know that brand consistency equals customer loyalty. So if your brand ambassadors are able to give you some perspective on, hey, are the agents speaking in that brand voice, that's a very powerful perspective within the quality program. And then certainly the manager, but then also the agent themselves. We found through these past 2 years here, the agents are their own worst critics in a lot of cases, and hearing themselves and being able to really identify with the things that we had been trying to coach them on, when they could actually hear it and be a part of that grading process themselves, it made a far more meaningful experience for everybody that was involved there. So have those multiple perspectives included in your quality program. And then 3, identifying those opportunities. So we've been able to create this really neat coaching library, and we have the symptom, here's what the opportunity is for improvement, and being able to match that symptom with some really good, meaningful training outcome that we've used and that we trust, we believe, and we know it's helpful, and that it's going to ultimately help that agent in the area of the symptom identified. And that's made available self-service for anybody that would like access to those training resources and the other things. So really trying to give the agents control of their own program and allow their own journey to take shape in their own terms and at their pace in a lot of the different ways. And of course, we're here to provide the guidance and ultimately be that coach for them and that mentor for them along the way. Let's go and jump to that next slide. So this coach's library has been really neat. I wanted to focus on that a little bit. So we have this really neat collaboration between the coach and then the manager and the agent. So in our environment, we don't have tiers. We found those tiers to not be very helpful in terms of facilitating a quick and helpful resolution. So we've had these coaches where ultimately, if the agent is stuck and they need some assistance in a particular area or a very difficult call, they have a coach that can jump and help into that situation. After the call, they're going to educate the analyst in terms of what that perfect resolution would look like and the different things. And that coach is also a part of that quality process as well, looking at the different calls and seeing how that agent is growing and developing over time. So we have that collaboration between the agent, the coach, and the manager in terms of identifying where are the opportunities for improvement and what are the best resources that might guide this agent to success. So identifying the very best training options. So everybody learns in different ways. And so one thing that we've been using too is combining this whole process with DISC, which is a great way to understand how your agents communicate and their default for how they ultimately receive information in the most compelling way. So by learning more about how your agents can take and retain information, it can help you in identifying the best training opportunities for them. And then that last bullet, they're matching the training with the symptoms. So let's take the opportunities that we're seeing as part of the quality program and match those up with the most meaningful training opportunities that exist. And it's been very helpful for us so far. Let's go and jump to that next slide. So my favorite part of this, so let's tie this back to the customer experience. So that wake-up call for me was when the one question was asked of, well, you changed your internal quality score from X to X, so what? And so we've really evolved in this area of making sure that there's meaningful outcomes from this quality program into what matters most, improving the customer experience. So we've tied in this wonderful voice of the customer program here. So a lot of what was going on a few years ago is that the agent just felt powerless on the call. They felt powerless when they were receiving feedback from a customer about something that could be better, whether it's something better about our processes internally that was causing a hurdle for them, something better about the product or service. The agent was there and they had their path to ultimately resolve a problem. But what could you do with the feedback element? What could you do to demonstrate to the customer that you care about them and that their voice is important and we're going to be able to react and respond to that feedback? So by tying that voice of the customer program in directly into the ticketing system, directly into the quality program of being able to say, did this customer provide feedback and did you successfully capture that feedback element as part of this interaction? That's a very meaningful outcome. And it builds that confidence that we talked about with that agent where they know they can help this customer out, even if it's not a specific, I got a problem, fix my problem. Because we all know that managing the perceptions of people extends beyond that black and white fix, solve scenario. They want to know that you actually care about the relationship and that you're trying to help them out beyond whatever they articulated as the problem statement. So then we have this contact center metrics, our CX metrics, and Jeremy Watkin had an awesome post about this recently, calling the contact center a CX lab, which I just think that's a very cool term, and it's very true that your contact center metrics absolutely have a place within your CX dashboard. I mean, that is showing when we talk about effort and trying to reduce effort both for the agent and for the customer, if we're seeing holdups and stop gaps in our ability to facilitate a quick and easy resolution within the contact center, you're going to struggle with that customer experience metric, NPS, CSAT, customer growth engine, whatever you're measuring in terms of your customer experience. Maybe it's even the fundamental things around renewal rates and other things. Make sure that those contact center metrics have a place in providing that holistic perspective of why is it that our customers feel this way about our brand? Because that customer service moment is so critical to turn a bad experience into a good one. If it's done well and they find out that they can resolve their issues quickly and easily, it's going to create a win instead of a very dangerous, precarious moment in that customer journey. And then last but not least, we have this awareness of the customer journey. So it's just thinking beyond the quality program. It's thinking beyond the call and equipping the agents with the knowledge of what's going on in this big picture. Now, I like to think of the customer service interaction as a bit of a marriage. The customer service rep knows better than anybody else in the org the product or service. They know the intimate details of that. And the customer is over here, and they have a problem with it. And that CX agent, that customer service agent, is required to take what they know about the product and ultimately marry it with what they know about that customer to find the best possible resolution that's there. And if that agent only knows, hey, I'm just going to resolve the top layer of whatever this customer's telling me, but they're not considering the bigger picture of what's going on with this customer, what are they actually trying to accomplish? Because that will change the entire dynamic of the call. You can resolve the issue and then say, oh, by the way, you're about to have X happen in 2 weeks. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to give us a call back at that time, and I'm going to help you to do this. Or, hey, did you know about this regulation that's coming down the pipe? This is going to impact you guys in your business. It would be very good if you were to be proactive in this area. If that agent knows the product and knows the customer so well, and they're being proactive and trying to help and guide and be a solution expert, it's going to evolve the entire experience. So that's where we're focusing, is not just, hey, did you have a great greeting? Did you say the right words? It's, did you use that higher level thinking in terms of helping this customer out and using your knowledge of that overall journey? And that's where we want our program to evolve. and ultimately where we want our agent experience to evolve is for them to have that level of knowledge and that consultative ability. So it's been a lot of fun evolving in this area. Quality is so important. I'm so happy that we were able to get out of the quantity victim mode a while back, and I love what Scorebuddy is doing to guide people and raise the bar for all of us in terms of our ability to really make better, higher quality interactions. It's been an exciting evolution. Yeah, so a little just quick thing about me. So I'm a practitioner. I love helping teams out. I have my team over here, and we're learning together, and my favorite channel for sharing the things that we're learning together is through CX Accelerator. It's a virtual community on Slack for CX professionals, and just got a bunch of resources out there. It's all free, and it's all designed to help CX professionals, and would also love for you to follow me on Twitter at customerisfirst. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for your presentation. It was extremely well received, I'm sure. So at this point, what we'd like to do, folks, is to conduct a quick poll, and that poll will be very simple. The question is, have you involved your agents and supervisors in the design of your QA program? Yes or no? So if you'd be so kind as to click on the answer, we'll leave it open for a little bit. And we'd love to hear back from you as to whether or not you've involved your agents and supervisors in the design of your QA program. Okay, so we have 64% of you saying yes and 36% saying no. So the preponderance of people here have involved the agents and supervisors in the design of the QA program, but what do you have any thoughts about that, either Nate or Derek, about whether how these results square with your experience?
Nate, maybe you comment first.
That's very exciting. That's a very mature audience that we have today. It took me 1.5 years to realize that the agents should be a part of the design of the QA program, I'm embarrassed to say. So it's wonderful that that you guys are queuing up to that already. And for those that aren't, it may not make sense in every environment. You know, in a lot of more support centers versus ultra contact center focused environments, it may not always make sense to really have the agents be part of the design process. But I would imagine in most cases it does, at least at some level. At least have a stakeholder presence where they're providing some guidance and saying, yeah, that's really helpful, or ultimately, no, here's what the consequence of that's going to be.
Yeah, I totally agree, Nate. I mean, it's hugely encouraging to see how many people directly involve the agents, because that's something that we've been, I suppose, promoting for a long period of time. We can see across a lot of different practitioners and I suppose domains, and we're constantly saying, look, you're going to get the best results if you involve your agents. For those who don't, you're right, you know, it could be that the environment is a little bit more regulated, more restrictive just by its nature. But even at that level, I think you'll get more engagement from the agents as you go through the assessment process, if you can engage them in the design process. The other thing I would say is design doesn't stay still. The design that works for you today may not work for your business as it changes and evolves. So, you know, in the future, there are more opportunities to engage with the agents and to include them in the process.
That's a great point.
Rick, I think you're up. Let me go.
Okay, so folks, what I'm going to try and do is describe from our experience, and also, I suppose, from a technology perspective, how do you go about joining the dots between, you know, coaching and training, performance assessment, and the customer experience, and trying to understand those relationships and the nuances within those relationships. There are many different approaches. So what I would say is that we've seen standalone solutions, we've seen integrated solutions that go part way to solving some of these problems. But I want to talk to you about, you know, what our view is and how we interpret the evolution, if you like, of quality assessment as a framework. Okay, so very quickly, just to give it context, intuitively we know that, you know, the quality of the service that we deliver in, you know, at the front of house is going to have some sort of impact on the customer experience. And I would say that we understand that If somebody's calling the contact center, it's probably because it's a complex issue that needs resolving and there's emotion and stress involved, and that it requires a fair degree of skill from the agents to probably manage that situation. But looking at Frost and Sullivan, they just confirm what we probably know instinctively. 89% of the contact centers in this particular study reported that customer satisfaction scores were impacted by CX issues either moderately or severely, 45 and 44%. That poor customer satisfaction impacts on revenue, which you would expect, negative 45%, and new customer acquisition by negative 60%. And that scores and ratings, 92% of those surveyed reported CX issues negatively affect NPS, customer effort, or customer satisfaction scores, again, as you would expect. And 60% of contact centers indicated an interest in analyzing how CX issues impact on those ratings. An interest in doing it is one thing, but achieving that can be something of a challenge in terms of your processes and structures and your technology. So to echo what Nate has been describing as his journey, what we find is a lot of customers are starting in the trenches. They're trying to deal with that struggle of volume and resourcing, right-sizing to handle the volumes and handle the peaks. And we find that our customers embark on that journey. We describe it as 3 phases. Operational phase, where you're trying to address consistency and agent performance. The tactical stage, where you're actually trying to move the needle on key business goals. And then the strategic phase, which is the nirvana, where you're trying to get to the point where you're directly impacting and understanding the impact on customer experience, and you're also engaging with all the other stakeholders within the business to make that work. So we feel that most organizations move through these stages as a natural evolution. There's no strict pace that you have to go through this process. It depends on your circumstance. But knowing which stage you're in and your business is working to will absolutely help inform smart decision making and help you grow your business. Okay, so the operational level is typically about maintaining consistent service delivery. So you're doing your basic analysis. You're trying to identify poor performers and manage them, coach them, or exit them from the business. And you're typically measuring adherence to process and procedures. And you may be doing some agent development tracking. So typically what we would find is our client base are moving from a more manual process and trying to add efficiency and I suppose scale to what they're doing. And they're in that operational phase. And typically what we would find is they're moving from, they're taking probably a spreadsheet or a paper-based process, and they're really just translating that into our environment and not really, they haven't got enough information really to make informed choices about how they might change the framework. So they're really moving an existing framework into a new environment. At a tactical level, once you've been running in that environment for a while, you now have information flowing through and you're getting feedback from agents and supervisors and evaluators, and you're beginning to look at customer experience and that impact. You're assuming that you're maintaining consistency, you're assuming you're managing poor performance, and you're now looking at reducing staff churn through engagement, trying to identify knowledge gaps, trying to identify root causes of poor service. So you're now looking at really transition and change rather than just managing as is. By managing and understanding where poor service is coming from, you're trying to eliminate those poor service issues. They may be behaviors, they may be environmental issues, they may be process issues, they may be technology issues, but at least you're identifying them and you're trying to move them along and improve the outcomes. You have the opportunity to report on trends, and you're more tightly aligning your quality goals with the broader business goals. So we start with, minimum service delivery, minimum behaviors that are acceptable. But now we're looking at how do those behaviors and performance, how does that affect the achievement of goals more broadly within the business? Stage 3 really is where you move to comparing and contrasting the customer satisfaction scores. So your NPS score or your customer effort score, or your CSAT scores, and looking at the correlation between the internal measurement of QA and the external measurement of customer sentiment. And remembering also that customers can't always see transparently into your organization. So there may be process issues, there may be regulatory issues that you have pushed or forced on you in terms of the service that you deliver, which by their nature negatively affect the customer sentiment. So you have to take that into account when you're trying to understand that relationship between customer satisfaction and quality assessment. But the objective really is to improve the propensity to purchase, to repurchase, and to be brand loyal ultimately. So we're trying to align quality internally with our external measurements of customer service. Okay, so building a quality framework. We view it as a life cycle. Again, it's echoing the evolutionary path that Nate was describing in his journey. It starts by gathering data, understanding where you are now before you move on and make any changes. You're trying to benchmark the information that you have, and you're doing it across multiple channels. So, I suppose the richest environment is really the one-to-one real-time call, but naturally, chat and email are growing sources of customer interactions, and you need to take that into account. And they have different requirements around them as a medium. Customer surveys, probably a good idea to get your marketing people or whoever is conducting your customer surveys involved at the moment, and try and craft a survey that's going to give you a benchmark for starting the redesign of your quality framework and establishing the goals that you want to reach and the behaviors that you want to teach, and promoting those within the customer service group. So with that information and armed with that information, you're in a position to start thinking about designing your QA framework. Obviously, it has to reflect customers' needs and expectations, but it also has to reflect your business's needs and align with those. And the goals will be set by a balance between those two. At the same time, you need to be thinking about, well, okay, what are the behaviors and outcomes that am I trying to achieve, and what do I need to inform my agents? How do I need to coach my agents to deliver against those goals? The next thing I would suggest is that you think about annotating and tagging data. So typically, particularly if you're using spreadsheets at the moment, the best you can do is add the odd comment in, maybe put a summary comment at the bottom, and associate that with an outcome and a score. With a tool like Scorebuddy, what you'd be looking to do is actually add more data, add more metadata, as you might call it. And what this is going to allow you to do is to filter and categorize the information then further downstream. So you're thinking about things like a root cause of a poor outcome. You're thinking about maybe things like comments that would be useful in terms of pointing an agent at a piece of coaching or a piece of training that might improve a particular behavior within the body of the interaction. So if you can gather that at the same time as you're doing, typically an evaluator will spend anywhere between 5 to 10 minutes on analyzing a particular interaction. If you can gather more data in that time frame and it gives you more insight downstream, then that's a really positive outcome. Once you're getting this data coming in, you now have, you can compare and contrast that with your CSAT and your post-transaction surveys, and you can start seeing what the connection is between those two sources of information. And then once we've identified those issues, we can start thinking about changing and evolving our framework. We can modify weightings, modify the coaching that we're providing to our agents, and more targeted training, not just around behaviors, but to the individuals that need that training. And we go through the process again. And so it is a virtuous circle where we are gathering data, making informed decisions, changing our approach, and achieving improvements. So using the right tools. What tools should you be using? I mean, most of us started with spreadsheets, and again, a lot of the customers we work with would have started with spreadsheets and trying to, I suppose spreadsheets really get to a point where it's a generic tool. It's not really designed for this purpose, and it gets to a point where it becomes unusable in terms of scale. It's very hard to scale up, it's very hard to manage, and it's very hard to share the information in a collaborative and engaging way. So we would obviously be advocating a built-for-purpose tool, which really streamlines the process of the data gathering at the front end and allows evaluators to, as I say, annotate and tag the information, and then to share that information across the stakeholders, both within the contact center, but also outside of the contact center within the broader business. We also talk about gap analysis, and we're interested in establishing our goals and targets for certain behaviors or for certain outcomes, and then looking at the shortfall or thereabouts. Or are we achieving? Maybe we're overachieving on those goals. So gap analysis is really looking at the difference between actual and desired, or actual and forecast. Typically, again, designed with the customer's needs at the forefront, collecting the data with this analysis in mind so that we can look at it downstream. And your framework should really address your internal and external QA scores and goals. This is just an example of what you might get once you get to that point in your evolution. This is real-time data coming from one of our clients, and really what they're looking at is the root cause of poor service across a particular group of scorecards. And I've just blown it up here because it's probably hard to see in terms of scale. Number one is left inadequate notes. Number two is incorrect information given to the caller. Number three, didn't set the right expectation. And number four is overpromise. So naturally, if I'm thinking about coaching, if I'm thinking about my next meeting with my supervisors, these are the things I'm going to emphasize that I want to resolve. If I can knock those four down, then obviously I'm going to get a broad increase and improvement in QA. So if we get to that tactical moving towards the strategic phase of evolution, we will undoubtedly uncover what I call the CX gap. And this is essentially the difference between internal QA scores and your external customer sentiment or view of the service that you're delivering. And generally they diverge. If you think about it, there's a natural sort of inclination. If you've got a group of evaluators, a group of professionals working in customer service, and they're cooperating to generate an outcome, they will gravitate towards I suppose, scoring QA high, because those goals may be internal business goals as opposed to customer-led goals. So there is a natural tendency for QA internally to be scored higher than customer sentiment when it's scored externally, and I call that the gap. So how do we address that? Firstly, how do we identify it? And secondly, how do we address it? Carrying out post-interaction customer effort surveys is one way of doing it. It's an important way of doing it. And naturally, you want association with the call, so you need to do it quite quickly after the call. If marketing is doing a monthly survey or a quarterly survey, you're not really going to get that transactional customer effort score. So we would be suggesting you use customer effort as your primary metric post-transaction. You can still do your NPS scores monthly or bi-monthly, but they tend to be a broader measure of customer sentiment, whereas customer effort is very much related to that point in the customer journey where the customer is just interacted. Great if you can attribute those NPS scores and CSAT scores to teams and supervisors and individuals, and that will give you an understanding of the root causes, because you're getting customer sentiment and customer comments coming back saying, it was okay, but I wasn't mad about the following, and they will identify where there may be a problem within the customer service delivery. So use your CSAT scores to help bridge that QA gap, and your goal is to align your quality scores with your CSAT scores. Your quality scores may actually drop in the short term, but they will be more reflective of what your customers are saying about the service that you deliver. So the argument is, if I know what's going on, I can manage it and I can improve it. And I'm getting real improvement. So identify customers, what customers rate important, and then revise. So guys, in summary, we talked about evolution, we talked about a journey. That's been our experience, and certainly it sounds like it's been Nate's experience as well. Linking QA effectively to your CX outcomes is a journey. It starts with using the right tools and trying to inform the goals that you set, review the goals that you set, and modify and improve. Adding tags, I'm using the term generally, but adding rich content to the evaluations as you gather them is going to give you insight, and it's definitely going to point the way for positive change. Analysis and ongoing measurement will track progress. So as you look at trends, you'll see how you're doing and what's improving, and you'll know where to focus your attention, your coaching attention, and your management attention. And the goal is really to eliminate that gap, to align your QA and QX, and if you get them close together, you know you're doing something right. So with that, I'll hand back to Ellen, and I think we're going to take some QA.
Well, thank you very much, Derek. I appreciate it. We are at the end of our program, but we will have the recording and the slides available to you soon after the webinar is over, but we'd like to take questions now from the audience to see if there's anybody that has questions pertaining to, for either Nate or for Derek, pertaining to what we've seen, and you can put those questions right in the question box, the chat box that you see on your screen, and it should be available to you. Okay, I have two questions that came up right away. I'm going to throw this out first to Nate, if you would. Nate, it says, what were the most difficult challenges in rolling out your QA framework?
Yeah, the agents immediately resented the fact that we were doing it. Many of them had come from an environment where QA was viewed extremely negatively. It had an extremely poor connotation associated with it, and they thought that by us going down the path of initiating a quality program that we were going to ruin the culture and the vibe that we had created within our customer service center. It took a long time to demonstrate to the agents that that's not what was happening, and that we designed this program literally to help make them better. And that was the number one objective of the program. They did not trust us in that until probably a good 8 months later, when, I mean, we proved to them that that's why we created the program.
Terrific.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, again, we see across multiple environments and some quite large organizations. And again, it comes back to Nate's point. It really is engagement. If you can engage the agents early on, and it's a transparent process, it will be less likely to be perceived as a policing exercise. Now, that may well be the starting point, because you still need that sort of level of control. But I think, again, a mature approach and a transparent approach, you're going to get the agents engaged, and it'll go much smoother.
Yeah, no, that's a great comment. And there's this resource I've been into lately called Prime to Perform. So, I mean, it's all about employee motivation, right? And it's kind of taking Daniel Pink's drive that he wrote about 15 years ago, and it had the autonomy, mastery, and purpose. These are the things that motivate our agents or anyone to the behaviors that we're compelling them toward. And I mean, it's so much better and different than the dynamic that it used to be, the carrot or the stick. And we'd have this program, and if we slap somebody with a fail score or a 0 or whatever, and there was like a negative consequence with that, we're stripping our ability to positively motivate the agents. And so, I mean, this book is all about how can you develop a sense of curiosity and excitement about that work. How can you develop that concept of mastery? Because everybody wants to become an expert. They want to be recognized as knowledgeable in an area. And if you create this program to where it's connotated that, wow, this is helping me to become an expert, this is making me better, this is sharpening me, they're going to like it. It's all about that approach.
Hold that up one more time, that book? Somebody's asking?
Yeah.
Great.
Prime to Perform, Neil Doshi and Lindsay McGregor. Awesome book.
Beautiful.
Right.
Okay, we have some more questions. We have plenty of time to answer, if you would. Let me go to the next question. Nate, you mentioned a quality team and breaking down the dynamic, kind of an us versus them mentality. You think there's a value in having a separate QA team in order for the QA agent to stay objective?
I think that is important, and having that neutral group is great, but it does come down to you've got to include multiple perspectives. You've got to have other individuals who represent different areas within the organization, or at least different areas within your department. If the only people that are providing a score and or feedback and coaching is coming from this separate entity called the quality team, you're creating a naturally tension-filled dynamic there. So having multiple perspectives, I mean, as an example, performance management. I mean, when you're getting coaching at the end of the year from a performance appraisal or something like that, I mean, what do you appreciate more? Having that 360 degrees of feedback that comes from your peers, that comes from you, how you ascertain your performance that year, also your manager and also different individuals you worked with with projects throughout the company, that is such a more meaningful approach to performance management. The same principle applies to QA. If you include those multiple perspectives, you strip out that us versus them dynamic, and that can be one critical perspective, and it's a highly weighted neutral perspective. But in order for that agent to not immediately assume, wow, the problem is theirs and they just don't get it, and they've never done this job, and if multiple people and multiple perspectives are resonating with the same principles of, hey, you could do a little better in this area, it will disarm that agent and they won't be near as defensive towards the QA group.
Great.
Yeah, I suppose in answer to that, Ellen, scale kicks in here, right? So some very large organizations, they need dedicated teams. It's very demanding on the supervisors to have to do evaluations, particularly if they're high occurrence or high frequency evaluations. So what we find is that for larger organizations, what works is a QA evaluation team, but they have to work really closely with the supervisors. So for instance, the supervisor has to know there's been an evaluation. If it's a very poor evaluation, the supervisor may review it with the evaluator before the agent is even aware of it. Or if the agent becomes aware of it and is unhappy with it, they have to write a reply. They have to be able to request a one-to-one. And so, that dynamic, and as you say, Nate, that transparency and openness and sort of collaboration around a result has to be there, or you will get that sort of, my supervisor knows me better than somebody who's 2 floors up, right? So I think it's a scale issue. I think it's easier. What we see is for medium-sized centers, the supervisors are directly involved in the evaluation process. But as you get over a certain size, you got to work that out. But I absolutely with Nate, you have to try and keep it open and transparent, and absolutely give the agent the right to reply. And I think that's the secret.
Thank you. There's one other question that I want to get to, which I think is a really good one. So what is the best way to get leader buy-in to the program? As QAs, this is one of our challenges. Are QA scores measured at a team level a bad idea? The best way to get leader buy-in to the program, it's one of their biggest challenges. Are QA scores measured at a team level a bad idea?
Yeah, I'll take that first one in terms of the getting leadership buy-in. I mean, everything needs to be framed in that ROI conversation. What's the impact on the bottom line? Why is this sustainable and important? And there's 2 huge opportunities here for you to be able to show an impact to the bottom line. One is the engagement and loyalty that your agents will have to you, to your company, when QA is done well. If they feel like they're learning, if they're improving themselves, they're going to stay there longer. And we all know the cost of having to go out and hire new people and train up new people. It's a massive bottom line hit. So that loyalty factor is one. Number 2, as Derek was very clearly proclaiming, this has a massive impact on CX, those NPS scores, those other scores. And if you're looking at like the customer lifetime value of a detractor or a neutral versus the customer lifetime value of a promoter, which is generally going to spend 6 times more with your organization over their lifetime, we're talking about a huge revenue opportunity associated with increasing those NPS scores. So, I mean, there's definitely a leadership conversation that you can have and take multiple angles on how you will improve the bottom line through an established QA program.
Yeah, I suppose, what we find is that our first commercial conversations are usually about efficiency. It's about, it's taking me too long to do my evaluations. It's taking me too long to prepare the reports. It's taking me too long to do my reviews. And that's our starting point. So it becomes an efficiency sort of cost reduction conversation. But as the data builds and as the framework evolves and as everybody gets more exposure and insight to what's going on, it's an easier conversation. Then you can make the connection between, outcomes and other key business metrics, i.e. loyalty. And the only way you can measure those things, it's quite difficult, and there's probably a lag between getting your quality right and getting your CSAT right, or reflected in the CSAT. But there's no senior management group that's going to ignore a marked or a measurable improvement in CSAT. And if you have the right tool, you'll be able to tie that back to, well, this is what caused it. We improved at a key emotional touch point in the customer journey. We did a great job, and look what happened. And so that's the sort of conversation you need to have. One of the other things I would say, if you're struggling to implement a QA program, or to move it from using spreadsheets and that sort of that productivity sort of driver, that you know, it's a necessary but evil work process within the organization. The difficulty we see is what I call inertia within organizations. So we're so busy, we're too busy to change and improve. And typically, you know, you need sponsorship at management level to say, okay, we got to take time out to understand what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong, and to implement a new framework that is going to take us into a new space. But we got to make the space to do that. And if we keep running so hard and leaving things the way they are, nothing is going to improve. It won't change. So it is a difficult conversation initially. And as I say, it starts with efficiency, and we're going to save money doing the things we already have to do. But it becomes a more interesting conversation as you get the data on board.
Yeah, that's well said. I know, I think David H. is out here. He'll laugh because to the other question in regards to should this be done at a team level, I love doing everything at a team level except probably this. It just doesn't make sense to me, because I mean, what you're trying to accomplish through this program is that individual is being coached, and that individual knows through QA how they can improve as an individual in terms of the scope of their role and their impact within CX. I mean, if you have a team and you could definitely give the team some motivation in terms of here's what we're seeing, here's some of the trends, but most of the coaching and the actual outcomes has to be done on an individual level, would be my impression.
Right.
Yeah.
So finally, we have one last thing. I think it says, would it be possible to share examples of effective questions on rubrics that help bridge the voice of the customer into the interaction? So I guess what we could do is follow up with this person after the webinar and share examples of questions on, you know, rubrics that you've used to help the, you know, bridge the gap between the voice of the customer and the interaction.
Yeah, no, I was trying to see that one slide, Derek, where you had some of the samples of your questions on the one form. Those look like really good questions. I was actually curious about that myself. Some of the things that you're recommending in terms of the questions asked.
Yeah, I mean, you know, certainly we can happily share with the audience some, I suppose, what we would see as benchmark or I suppose, top line questionnaires. I mean, again, I would emphasize everybody's environment is different, right? We've also seen, interestingly, we've seen QA spread into the back office as well. So when you address the front of house issues, and this is something, again, you might take to your senior management when you're having that engagement conversation, you know, you can start thinking about, well, what's the service level that the back office guys are providing to my frontline troops in order for them to deliver quality to my customers? And you can start thinking about extending the framework downstream into the organization. So happy to share, you know, what we think, I suppose, are killer scorecards, maybe by channel. And so as follow up to this, we'll gather some information together and attach that to the pack.
There were 3 or 4 people that would like that as well. So we'll definitely get back to you individually about the rubric and the you know, the type of it says, you know, there are people that are looking for sample questionnaires. So great.
I like that. One very easy baseline to establish. So Jeremy Hyde recommended this on icmi.com like 3 or 4 years ago, and it stuck with me so hard. He starts with 3 simple questions. What was the purpose of the call? What went well? And what would you do differently? And you root your scorecard on those 3 conversations, and that's how we've designed ours in the root of those 3 basic principles, and it's been great for us.
Yeah.
Terrific. Okay, well, that concludes our program for today. We thank everybody again for your participation. We'll have the recording and the slides available to you soon after the webinar is over. And again, thank you very much, Derek and Nate, for your time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Nate. Take care, guys. See ya.